The political and socio-economic environment in Taiwan from 1945 to 1949. The historical divide between Taiwan and China. Taiwan was a Japanese colony from 1895 to 1945. During these 50 years, China experienced relentless and long conflicts, internally and externally. It is not an exaggeration to say that China was at war every year. There was little development in China economically, culturally, and socially, let alone any progress in popularizing education. In contrast, Taiwan had undergone peaceful modernization under Japanese rule. The only disruptions were the anti-Japanese uprisings in the first few years of Japanese rule and its involvement at the end of World War II. This resulted in the great economic divide between Taiwan and China. For example, in 1943, Taiwan posted 253 kilometers of railroad travel per capita that year. China did not reach this level until 1986. In 1941, there were 5 telephones per 1,000 residents in Taiwan. In China, this number was not reached until 1983. In 1947, per capita electricity generation in Taiwan was 12 times that of China. In his book, Speaking Out for Taiwan, journalist Chang reported that all the Chinese officials and tourists were impressed by Taiwan's progress and prosperity. A Shanghai biweekly paper also acknowledged that Taiwan was a clean and beautiful green island. Many Chinese would leave their dirty and unstable homeland and move to Taiwan to restart their lives and reestablish their businesses. In its editorial 15 days before the 228 incident, the Dagong Daily noted that the Taiwanese were well-educated, highly skilled, and diligent. In the eyes of many Chinese, Taiwan was truly a paradise. At the beginning of Chinese rule, the Taiwanese genuinely welcomed the arrival of the mainlanders. However, they immediately discovered their incompatibility as soon as they came into contact with them. After having fought against the Japanese for 8 years, the Chinese were extremely displeased to find the Japanese way of life so ingrained and prevalent in Taiwan. In the eyes of the Chinese, the Taiwanese were merely Japanese slaves. On the surface, the Chinese recognized the Taiwanese as compatriots. In reality, they acted as the victors and the conquerors. The Democratic Weekly of Beijing observed that the Chinese who first came to reclaim Taiwan behaved like invaders. They were arrogant and contemptuous towards the local population. Undisciplined soldiers and police. After 50 years of stringent rule by the Japanese, the Taiwanese had become law-abiding people. Unfortunately, Chinese troops that were dispatched to Taiwan were undisciplined. A military captain noted, "Indeed, the 70th Army behaved very badly. Before landing in Keelung, some went ashore with a blanket on their back, some rambled around in their straw sandals, and some urinated at the side of the ship." The Chinese troops committed theft, looting, and murder. They swindled, harassed, and threatened the civilian population. They refused to pay for goods in stores and bus fares. They spat on the streets and committed robbery and rape. There is an unbelievable story in Professor Lee's book, Understanding the 228. Some Chinese soldiers bought a coffin to bury a dead comrade. After the burial, they returned the used coffin and demanded a refund from the coffin maker. George Kerr, the vice consul in Taiwan at the time, recorded in detail the lootings committed by the Chinese in his 500-page book Formosa Betrayed. From September 1945 until the year's end, The military scavengers were at work at the lowest level. Anything movable, anything lying loose and unguarded for a moment, was fair prey for ragged and undisciplined soldiers. The second stage of looting was entered when the senior military men, the officer ranks, organized depots with forwarding agents at the ports through which they began to ship military and civilian supplies. By the end of 1946, these huge reserves were fairly well exhausted. Power in the hands of the mainlander. The mainlanders denied well-educated Taiwanese the opportunity to participate in politics on the pretense that the Taiwanese did not possess administrative ability or command of the Chinese language. Chinese senior officials would not employ local Taiwanese. In order to solidify their positions, they brought their own subordinates, even janitors, from mainland China. Senator Lim Rit-gao exposed many practices of nepotism and cronyism in the KMT government. Many Taiwanese were fired without cause so that friends and relatives from China could be employed. In one reported case, the dean of Tainan Engineering Institute, a mainlander, hired his illiterate father-in-law to teach Chinese. Engineering students were forced to learn Mandarin pronunciation, sing the national anthem, and practice Tai Chi from this illiterate teacher every day. The Taiwanese received less pay than a mainlander of equal rank. The difference could sometimes be more than 50%. Skyrocketing consumer prices. Consumer prices skyrocketed 20,000 times. Some have said 40,000 times within the 4 years between the reclamation in 1945 and the retreat of the KMT to Taiwan in 1949. This table shows the escalating price of rice. These were the dire consequences of looting and exploitation of all kinds. George Kerr recorded what he had witnessed in detail in his book Formosa Betrayed. The year of 1946 was one of economic disaster. It saw consumer prices soar. As Taiwan became the paradise of corruption, the only happy people were the high-ranking officials and their friends. Within 1 year, they turned the Taiwanese industrial assets into gold bars to hoard in safe places. The Minister of Finance himself controlled 3 money-printing machines. He endeavored in the printing of banknotes in 1946. A bank employee told me that no record was kept and amount was unknown. Runaway inflation led to serious unemployment. According to New Daily Life, the unemployment rate of the non-agricultural population reached 35%. As life became harsh, a Beijing reporter said he had been told, half a year before, that Taiwan was green and beautiful with no beggars to be found. It was truly a treasure island. But he lamented, "Today's Taiwan is a different Taiwan. People are suffering, looting is rampant, and beggars appear in the streets." When Chiang Kai-shek made his first visit to Taiwan in October 1946, growing social and economic problems were already discernible. An American journalist who witnessed these events in Taiwan said the initial joy of reclamation evaporated overnight when the Taiwanese came to realize that Taiwan was not liberated. Rather, they had been conquered by people inferior to them.